She got picked as project lead. Bet she's got a special connection with the boss. Mark smirked, his voice just loud enough for the other male engineers in the break room to hear. Yeah, no way she moved up that fast on skill alone. Another chimed in, glancing sideways as Jessica walked in. She stopped mid-step, hearing every laugh, every loaded word aimed at her, all because she was a woman. What none of them knew was that she was about to use her own skill to shut every single one of them up. The break room at Pinnacle Advertising was a sterile box of glass and chrome, the coffee machine's hiss swallowed by the swelling tide of laughter that crashed against the walls. Mark, wiry and sharp-eyed, leaned against the counter, his tailored suit creased from a long day of schmoozing clients, his smirk, a polished badge of his status as the agency's golden boy, always golfing with the CEO, his name whispered as the heir to a corner office. I mean, come on, he said, his voice thick with sarcasm cutting through the clink of mugs. Jessica. Project lead. She's been here 5 years tops. Must have learned some real tricks to jump the line like that. The men around him, junior account managers in crisp shirts, creatives with sleek watches, egos honed by gym sessions and happy hours, chuckled, their eyes darting to Jessica like hawks spotting prey. Tom, a stocky copywriter who bragged about his Chicago Tribune contacts over beers, snorted, wiping his glasses with a smirk. Probably spends more time in the boss's office than at her desk, if you know what I mean. Sarah, a senior designer with a sharp bob and a habit of name-dropping her art gallery friends, rolled her eyes but added, well, girls like her know how to play the game. Can't blame her for using what she's got. Brian, a media planner in a faded Cubs cap, his laugh loud as a foghorn, piled on. What's her deal anyway? Always so quiet, like she's too good to talk to us. Bet she's cozying up to the right people. Lisa, an account coordinator in designer heels that clicked like a metronome, giggled, her manicured nails tapping her phone. Can you imagine her running a campaign? She'd probably cry if a client raised their voice. Jessica stood frozen, her hand gripping the coffee pot, her plain black blazer and sensible skirt suddenly feeling like a neon sign broadcasting her presence. Her face flushed, a heat rising under her skin, but her jaw stayed set, her fingers tightening until her knuckles paled. The room watched, waiting for her to stammer, blush harder, or bolt. She didn't. She poured her coffee, the liquid steady despite the faint tremble in her hand, the dark stream a silent act of defiance. Her low heels clicked on the tile as she walked out, each step measured her shoulders back, posture perfect the way she'd been taught since childhood. The laughter chased her, sharp and unrelenting, a chorus of scorn that echoed down the hall. Mark's voice rang out again, louder now, emboldened by her silence. See? Doesn't even have the guts to say anything. Typical. Tom's voice followed, heavy with mockery. A girl like that shouldn't be at the high table. Stick to fetching coffee, Jess. Sarah's laugh was softer but no less cruel, a knife wrapped in velvet. She's out of her league and everyone knows it. Brian's grin widened, his cap tilted back. Bet she's only good for smiling pretty at meetings. Lisa's voice sliced through, sharp as her heels. Maybe she's better at personal projects, you know. A junior creative with a man bun and a tech startup vibe muttered, no way she's got the brains for this. It's all politics. Another, in a loud tie that screamed self-importance, chimed in, she's just a diversity hire, right? Gotta check the boxes. A third, a guy with a gym bro swagger, added, bet she's got nothing but a pretty face and a few favors. The glass walls of the break room amplified every word, turning Jessica's exit into a gauntlet. Each step a test, each laugh a judgment. She kept her head high, her presence a quiet rebuke, her silence louder than their jeers. Jessica reached her desk, set her coffee down untouched, and opened her laptop, her fingers pausing on the keys as the office's hum enveloped her. Her cubicle was a small island of order, unadorned except for a small silver locket draped over a photo frame turned away from prying eyes. She glanced at the frame, her mother elegant in a simple dress standing by a garden gate, her smile soft but resolute. Years ago, at a charity gala in their family's sprawling estate, her mother had worn that dress, and the whispers had been vicious, cheap, outdated, doesn't belong here. The memory was sharp, her mother's hand warm in hers, her chin high as she navigated a sea of silk gowns and diamond studs, her presence a shield against the crowd's scorn. Jessica's fingers brushed the locket, its faint engraving worn from years of touch, a gesture unnoticed by the buzzing office around her. She turned to her screen, posture perfect, and began typing her work, a fortress against the whispers that slithered through the open-plan space. The office was a maze of cubicles and glass-walled meeting rooms, phones ringing keyboards, clacking the air thick with ambition and rivalry. The rumors spread like wildfire, fueled by Mark's sly comments in the elevator, Tom's crude jokes at the water cooler, Brian's knowing nudges over lunch. "Heard she's got the boss wrapped around her finger," a junior creative said, smirking as Jessica passed by with a stack of reports. "Bet she's got no real skills, just a good smile," another muttered loud enough for her to hear as she refilled her water bottle. Lisa, handing out meeting agendas, leaned in close, her perfume sharp. "So Jess, how'd you really get the lead role? Got any tips for us?" Her giggle was a blade, her heels clicking as she sauntered away, leaving a trail of whispers in her wake. The office transformed into a minefield, every glance loaded with judgment, every conversation a potential ambush. In the glass-walled conference room, the tension boiled over during a team briefing for the campaign, a multi-million-dollar pitch for a national retailer that could make or break careers. The table was crowded with egos and espresso cups, the Chicago skyline a gray smear through the windows. Richard the boss, a gray-haired man who valued results over office drama, stood at the head, his voice firm as he outlined the stakes. "Jessica's leading this one," he said, his tone brooking no argument. "She's got the vision and the track record to deliver." The room went quiet, a heavy pause that crackled with unspoken resentment, but Mark's eyes glinted, his smirk barely concealed behind a sip of coffee. As Richard left, Mark leaned back in his chair, his voice casual but laced with venom. "Real talent doesn't need tricks to get noticed, right?" The men chuckled, their laughs low and knowing a shared code that excluded Jessica. Tom coughed, adjusting his glasses, and muttered, "Some people just know how to work the system." Brian's grin widened, his Cubs cap tilted back. "Must be nice to have a shortcut." Sarah shifted her sharp bob, catching the light, and said, "Well, she's got to prove it now, doesn't she?" Lisa's voice was syrupy, her smile false. "Hope you're ready, Jess. The big leagues aren't for everyone." A junior account manager, his tie too bright, added, "Bet she's in over her head already." Another, a guy with a smartwatch that buzzed constantly, said, "Probably just a quota pick, right?" The women at the table, Sarah, Lisa, a few others, shifted uncomfortably, their glances awkward, their silence a betrayal that stung deeper than the men's words. Jessica's hands stayed folded on her notebook, her pen still, her face smooth as glass, betraying nothing. She stood, gathered her notes with deliberate care, and left her low heels clicking on the polished floor, her presence a quiet rebuke that lingered in the room's heavy air. Jessica paused in the hallway, her eyes catching on a framed poster of Pinnacle's first big campaign, its bold colors faded from years on the wall, the edges curling slightly. The memory was sharp, slicing through the office's hum, her father years ago standing in their estate study, showing her a similar poster, its lines vibrant under the glow of a desk lamp. "This is ambition, Jessica," he'd said, his voice low, steady, resonant with a quiet strength that filled the room. "But it's nothing without integrity." His cologne cedar and leather had mingled with the scent of old books, his hand resting on her shoulder, grounding her. The study's oak shelves gleamed, lined with volumes of history and finance, a testament to the empire he'd built. She'd been 12, her notebook open on the desk pages, filled with ideas for ads she'd dreamed up, her father's nod, a silent promise that she could be anything. The memory faded, and Jessica turned away, her expression unreadable, her fingers brushing the locket as she returned to her desk. The office buzzed around her, but the whispers followed like shadows. "She's only here because of who she knows," a voice said behind a cubicle wall. "No way she's got the chops," Sarah muttered, her voice carrying across the open space. "Bet she's panicking," Brian said, his laugh grating. Jessica kept working, her presentations sharp, her client calls flawless, her silence a wall against the scorn. The locket's weight was a quiet anchor, her focus a blade cutting through the noise, her dignity an unyielding fire that burned beneath her calm exterior. That night in her small apartment, Jessica stood before a mirror, the city's lights a faint glow through the window. She wore a plain t-shirt, her hair loose, her face bare of makeup, the lines of her features soft but resolute. She touched the locket, its weight familiar, and studied her reflection, her eyes steady, confirming she was still herself, unbroken by the office's cruelty. The memory of her mother's gala surfaced vivid and unbidden, the grand ballroom of their family estate, chandeliers casting golden light, silk gowns rustling, and her mother in a simple dress moving through a crowd of diamonds and disdain. The whispers had been cruel, cheap, outdated. She doesn't belong. But her mother's chin was high, her smile serene, her hand warm in Jessica's as they navigated the sea of judgment. The room had been thick with wealth and pretense, but her mother's presence was a shield, a quiet strength that silenced the crowd without a word. Jessica's hand dropped from the locket and she opened her journal, her pen moving across the page in neat, deliberate strokes. I gave up so much for this career. One lie could destroy it all. She closed the book, her movements precise, and went to bed, the locket resting on her nightstand, its faint gleam a reminder of her roots. The city hummed outside, its rhythm steady, her dreams quiet but resolute, her strength a fire forged in years of discipline. The rumors reached Richard's ears by the end of the week, carried by a nervous intern who'd overheard Tom's crude remarks in the break room. The project room turned icy, the team's chatter dying when Jessica entered, their eyes avoiding hers, their silence a new kind of judgment. She kept working, her timelines ruthless, her leadership silent but ironclad, her reports a testament to her skill. At a late-night meeting, the conference room's glass walls reflected the city's lights, the tables strewn with papers and half-empty coffee cups. Mark's voice cut through the tension, his tone light but venomous. "Hope you're ready for the client, Jess. Takes more than charm to pull this off." The chuckles were softer now, but they stung the room's silence louder than the laughter. Jessica's pen paused, her knuckles whitening, but her face remained smooth, her eyes fixed on her notes. She handed out revised schedules, her movements deliberate, and stood, leaving the room with her heels clicking, her presence unshaken. The glass walls framed her silhouette strong and solitary as she walked to the elevator. The memory of her father's study pulsed through her, his poster, his voice, his unwavering belief in her potential. She pressed the elevator button, the locket warm against her skin, her resolve hardening like steel in a forge. Jessica met her best friend Claire at a small cafe that weekend, the air thick with the scent of espresso and the patter of rain against the windows. Claire, her hair in a messy bun, her sweater speckled with paint from her latest illustration project, listened as Jessica spoke, her voice low but steady, her fingers tracing the locket's chain. "It's not just the rumors," Jessica said, her eyes fixed on her coffee cup. "It's the way they look at me, like I'm nothing, like all my work means nothing." Claire leaned forward, her eyes fierce, her voice cutting through the cafe's hum. "If you want to live with integrity, prove it. Let your work be the truth that silences them." Jessica's hand stilled, her gaze lifting, and she nodded, a small private gesture that carried the weight of a decision. The memory of her mother's gala flashed again, her simple dress, the cruel whispers, her strength unwavering, her hand a lifeline in the crowd. Jessica paid the bill, her movements deliberate, and walked into the rain, her umbrella unopened, the cold droplets sharp against her skin. The city's lights blurred her resolve, a quiet storm, her path clear as she headed home, the locket's weight a steady reminder of who she was. Jessica didn't quit. She tripled her effort, transforming her apartment into a war room of campaign notes, coffee cups piling on the counter, her laptop glowing late into the night. She synced with the client Ellen, a sharp-eyed woman who valued results over office gossip, and pitched bold ideas, interactive ad campaigns, a viral social media, push a rebrand that made Ellen's eyes light up with possibility. Jessica's reports were meticulous, her timelines brutal, her leadership silent but unyielding, a force that moved the project forward despite the office's hostility. She enlisted Claire to document the rumors, saving screenshots of group chats, noting Mark's comments verbatim, tracing every malicious whisper back to its source with a precision that rivaled her campaign work. At the office, she submitted weekly updates to Richard and HR, her emails detailed her metrics, undeniable her work, a fortress against the lies that swirled around her. Each night she stood before her mirror, the locket in her hand, her reflection steady, her eyes confirming she was still herself, unbroken by the weight of their scorn. The memory of her father's study came again, his poster, his scent of cedar and leather, his nod of approval as she'd shared her childhood ideas. She worked on the locket, warm against her skin, her dignity, a fire that burned through the office's cruelty, her resolve, a quiet tide reshaping the air around her. The office's atmosphere shifted, the whispers fading, replaced by uneasy glances as Jessica's work began to speak for itself. She walked the halls, her blazer simple, her locket hidden beneath her collar, her face calm, but her presence a shadow that loomed larger with each passing day. The project room, once a battlefield of snide remarks, grew quieter, the team's chatter subdued when she entered, their eyes darting away. She handed out assignments with a steady hand, her voice clear, her directions precise, her leadership a beacon in the chaos of deadlines. The memory of her mother's gala pulsed through her, her dress, the whispers, her strength, her hand warm in Jessica's as they faced the crowd. Jessica stood by the break room one morning overhearing a junior creative mutter, "Maybe she's not so bad, only for Tom to snap. Don't be fooled." She's still playing the game. The words stung, but Jessica's face remained smooth, her coffee cup steady, her locket a quiet anchor. She returned to her desk, opened her laptop, and worked her focus a blade, her silence a storm that gathered strength with each passing day. The campaign launched 3 months later, a triumph that shook the industry. Sales soared by 600%. The client's stock climbed, and Ellen sent a personal letter to Richard praising Jessica's unmatched vision, innovation, and crisis management. The office buzzed with a new energy, the whispers replaced by silence, the team's glances now tinged with unease, even awe. Jessica scheduled a meeting with Richard and HR, her blazer pressed, her locket tucked beneath her collar, her steps steady as she walked to the executive floor. In Richard's office, the skyline a gray canvas behind him. She sat across from him and the HR director, her voice calm, her words precise as a scalpel. "I'm aware of malicious rumors aiming to discredit my work," she said, her slides projected on the wall, charts and metrics glowing. "I believe in letting results speak for themselves. But if these lies go unchecked, this company becomes unsafe for any woman who tries to succeed honestly." Richard's face hardened, his jaw tight, while the HR director took notes, her pen moving swiftly. Jessica handed over her evident screenshots of group chats, notes of Mark's comments, a detailed timeline tracing the rumors' spread, and stood leaving the room with her heels clicking her presence, a quiet storm that left the air charged in her wake. The investigation moved with ruthless speed, HR auditing chat logs, interviewing staff, their questions sharp and unyielding. The truth unraveled like a fraying rope. Mark was the source, his whispers confirmed by Tom, Brian, and others who'd laughed along, their complicity laid bare. A week later, Richard called a company-wide meeting in the main conference room, the glass walls amplifying the tension, the city skyline a mute witness. Jessica stood near the back, her arms crossed her face, serene, her blazer hiding the locket that rested against her skin. Richard's voice was cold, cutting through the room's heavy silence. "Mark's actions violated our code of conduct. He's been demoted and will issue a written apology to Jessica, effective immediately." Mark stood, his smirk gone, his suit rumpled, his hands shaking as he held a paper, his voice unsteady as he read, "I apologize for my unprofessional behavior and the harm it caused." The room was silent, the air thick with shame, the team's faces pale, their laughter a distant memory. Jessica didn't smile. She nodded once, her eyes steady, and walked out, her heels clicking on the polished floor, her locket glinting faintly under the fluorescent lights. The fallout was swift and brutal, a reckoning that rippled through the office like a shockwave. Mark's clients were reassigned, his corner office. Dreams shattered, his reputation, reduced to a cautionary tale whispered in the break room. Tom's crude jokes stopped his Tribune connections, useless against the whispers of his role, his glasses fogging as he avoided Jessica's gaze. Brian's loud laugh faded, his media plans ignored his Cubs cap, a hollow prop in a room that no longer listened. Sarah and Lisa faced quiet reprimands, their silence during the rumors, a mark against them, their designer heels and sharp bobs no longer shields against the office's shifting tide. The other women who'd stayed silent, junior designers, account managers, began to speak up, their voices tentative but growing, inspired by Jessica's quiet strength. The office's air lightened, the team's chatter cautious, but tinged with a grudging respect. The break room no longer a battlefield, but a place of uneasy truce. Jessica walked the halls, her blazer simple, her locket, hidden, her face calm, her presence, a force that needed no words. The memory of her father's study surfaced, his poster, his voice, his hand on her shoulder, her work, a testament to his belief, her silence, a revolution that reshaped the office's culture. At the client summit held in a grand hotel ballroom with chandeliers casting golden light, Jessica presented the campaign to a crowd of industry leaders, her voice clear, her slides flawless, her ideas sparking murmurs of admiration. The room was packed, the air thick with ambition, the crowd's eyes fixed on her as she outlined the campaign's success. 600% sales growth, a viral social push, a rebrand that redefined the client's market. Ellen, the client, sat in the front row, her sharp eyes warm with approval, her nod, a quiet validation. When Jessica finished, the applause erupted, a wave of sound that filled the ballroom, the crowd rising to their feet. Ellen approached, her handshake firm, her voice low but resonant. "You're the real deal, Jessica. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. Jessica knotted her locket warm beneath her blouse, the memory of her mother's gala flashing her simple dress, the cruel whispers, her strength unwavering. She stood tall, her presence a shield her work, a beacon that burned through the office's lies. The summit's lights dimmed as she walked off stage, her heels clicking her locket, gleaming the applause, a quiet validation of her truth. Richard called Jessica to his office a month later, the Chicago skyline a gray canvas behind him, his face lined but warm with a rare smile. "You're our new head of strategic projects," he said, his voice steady. "First woman in the role. We trust you to lead our top-tier clients." Jessica shook his hand, her smile small but genuine, her blazer hiding the locket that rested against her skin. The memory of her mother's gala came again. Her dress, the whispers, her hand warm in Jessica's, guiding her through the crowd. She walked out her steps steady, her presence a force that reshaped the office's landscape. HR later used her story in leadership training, a case study on gender equity and toxic culture prevention, her name a symbol of integrity that echoed through the agency. The office changed, women speaking up with newfound boldness, men checking their words, the culture bending under the weight of her influence. Jessica paused by the faded poster in the hallway, its lines a quiet echo of her father's study, his poster, his voice, his belief in her. The locket gleamed beneath her blouse, her work a testament to his lessons, her silence, a revolution that needed no fanfare. The office's transformation was slow but undeniable, a ripple effect that spread beyond the glass walls of Pinnacle advertising. Women who'd once stayed silent in meetings began to pitch ideas, their voices tentative at first, but growing stronger, inspired by Jessica's quiet resolve. Men like Tom and Brian, once quick with jokes, now hesitated, their laughter replaced by cautious nods, their egos checked by the memory of Mark's fall. Sarah and Lisa, chastened by their reprimands, began to mentor junior women, their sharp bobs and designer heels no longer symbols of superiority but tools of collaboration. The break room, once a crucible of cruelty, became a place of quiet conversations. The coffee machine's hiss no longer drowned by laughter but accompanied by discussions of campaigns and deadlines. Jessica walked the halls, her blazer simple, her locket hidden, her face calm, her presence a tide that lifted others without effort. The memory of her father's study pulsed through her, his poster, his scent of cedar and leather, his nod as she'd shared her childhood dreams. She stood in meetings, her voice clear, her ideas sharp, her leadership a beacon that silenced doubters, her work a quiet fire that burned through the office's past. Late at night, Jessica stood in her apartment, the city's lights a faint glow through the window, her reflection steady in the mirror. She touched the locket, its engraving worn but clear, and studied her face, confirming she was still herself, unbroken by the office's cruelty. A memory surfaced vivid and unbidden, a Bentley pulling up to her family's estate years ago, its engine a low purr in the night, its license plate JLT catching the moonlight. She'd been young, watching from a balcony, the man who stepped out half lit, his nod heavy with meaning, his presence a shadow of resolve. Her father's voice had followed, low and firm. "That's your future, Jessica. Strength, not show." The memory was sharp, the man's silhouette like a mirror of her own quiet power, his nod, a promise she'd carried through the years. She turned away, the locket gleaming, her life a testament to that truth. Another memory flashed, her mother's gala, the whispers cruel, her chin high, her hand warm in Jessica's, guiding her through a crowd that judged but could not break them. The locket stayed her reflection, her own, her strength, a fire that burned through the lies, illuminating a path for others. The break room's laughter, the conference room's jeers, the office's cruelty, they were moments, not her story. Shadows she'd outshone with a light too fierce to be dimmed. Jessica's work, her silence, her dignity. They were a quiet fire that reshaped the office, a truth louder than the lies that had tried to bury her. Her father's study, her mother's gala, the Bentley's nod. They wove a tapestry of strength, love, and purpose. Her life, its brightest thread. She stood in her apartment, the city's hum a distant echo, her locket in hand, her eyes steady, her truth a beacon. The office's transformation was her legacy, her influence a tide that lifted others, her silence a revolution that needed no shout. For those who've faced judgment, who've carried the weight of lies, this story is yours, a mirror to your strength, a reminder of your worth. Share it, hold it close, let it echo in your heart, and if it moves you, leave a comment, a share. Join our YouTube channel, where stories like this find their voice, where dignity finds its home.